Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Season 7 of Diablo 4. We're back again with my Necromancer to give you a little update on how things are going with the Shadow Wave build and the version that I put together. In short, for an updated showcase, I'm absolutely dominating everything I go against. For farming my mythics, I've been one-tapping Duriel over and over. Incredibly thrilling gameplay, let me tell you. Only for him to give me 3 Celics and 3 Grandfathers. Incredible, thank you Duriel. So I spent 4 billion gold buying the runes I needed and I had half of them already. These prices are insane. So I've got kind of a mythic update for you where, yeah, everything in the open world, all kinds of content's dying the moment I press the first bloodwave. But in terms of the pit, this more universal build is able to clear up to 135 plus. I say plus because I technically don't have my other legendary occult gem yet. I don't have my final witch power set up, even though I've been grinding dungeons. I cannot find the last lost altars, but this build will do everything incredibly well. The only thing it won't do is push, say, to pit tier 150. And after looking at what people have been doing for that purpose, you basically have to mess with your build in terms of how it functions in the open world and normal content so that it can push pits further just for the fun and sake of it. So in my opinion, for your average player, this is going to be your best option and I'm really happy with what I've got here. So let's just kind of overview what's going on here. Firstly, since last time, we have our 2 mythic uniques, Heir of Perdition and Shroud of False Death. Why is it that these are the mythic uniques that you need to go for? Well, Heir of Perdition's kind of obvious. It provides you with this ridiculous damage bonus, a massive multiplier, but it has some serious relevance for this build. For example, as you can see, I'm getting 44% crit strike chance from just this item, thanks to some perfect masterworking. This means you no longer need to rely on something like the aspect of Grasping Veins for critical strike chance to get yourself towards 100%. Standing here in town, I have 84%, and the only other place I have crit strike chance on my gear is my gloves still. And with my skill tree, when I exit into a combat zone, that just goes up to 100 easily every time. So I have guaranteed crits without using Grasping Veins anymore, which means I can finally make the sacrificial swap, which is just a bigger damage bonus once you have the crit strike chance. However, very uninvasive to the build, and maybe arguably the thing you should pick up first if you have to choose between them, is Shroud of False Death. It's still quite a weird mythic unique, but one of the top contenders for a very simple reason. It provides you with +1 to all passives. So we've got an extra level of Fueled by Death for just an extra modifier to your damage. Things like Amplify Damage, Death's Embrace, more modifiers. The key passives that increase your damage, Gloom, Terror, Reaper's Pursuit, the all-important Tides of Blood, Coalesce Blood. Everything gets that level, and it's really, really quite potent. That is why this mythic unique is so good. Everything else doesn't really matter. But the whole next attack after stealth thing, it's cute, but it doesn't really happen in normal gameplay. It happens randomly. It's not something you really plan around. But it is something that's really easy to slot into the build, because on my chest piece before I had Hardened Bones, I just put this on. We lose Hardened Bones, but we get that +1 to all passives that's just worth the trade. We are already survivable enough. Otherwise, there are obviously other things we've changed, like we've got a new pair of boots to accommodate for the cursed aura aspect that was on my helmet before. We actually finally have a 2-handed mace that's ancestral with the right setup and stats, so I can get that inherent overpower damage. Big shout out to the viewer Jadnar for the help with this. I've been rolling so many of these maces and just not getting the chance. On that note, we've also made some really relevant changes to the Paragon of the setup that we have to allow for, say, lots more element resistance since we had to change the boots. We have indeed progressed with the Witchcraft powers, and I finally do have my first legendary gem, which is the Voice of the Stars, the most impactful one you could aim for initially. So yeah, lots to talk about today, so we're going to cover it all. This is overall what I believe to be the best build to use for the season, and the best version of it for general gameplay. As a little warning as well, there seems to be some sort of bug with bloodwave. I've noticed when I'm doing, say, the higher pit tiers, you got these packs of enemies that are getting bigger and bigger with massive health pools, and sometimes they take a bit of time to kill, right? But what's not normal is the fact that bloodwave occasionally literally does 0 damage. Like you're just pushing them around to doing no damage at all, then eventually time passes and it stops doing no damage and starts killing them again. But I couldn't tell you what's causing it, so I'm hoping the devs are aware and we get a fix for that soon. In terms of gameplay, you will see that I do have a new skill setup. We now have Sever on the bars. That allows me to get a little bit more value out of Reaper's Pursuit, a passive in the skill tree that increases your damage the more darkness skills you have on your action bar, as well as some nice quality of life in the form of movement speed. It also gives us a little way to guarantee vulnerability, which can be handy as a little trick. To make space for this, we do have to drop Corpse Tendrils, but that is a worthy trade. I've got more than enough Blood Orb generation at this point, and without the Grasping Veins aspect, you know, it doesn't really matter. This just greatly improves our raw output, which is going to matter for pushing pits in this version of the build. Let's cover all the stuff that's being used, the changes, and why, starting with the skill tree. Right, first up we have the basic attack, which is still Reap. Having looked at the top pit clears with this build now, I am seeing people use Decompose as just that empty extra darkness slot, but the reason that I don't think you should do that is because Reap actually has a benefit. If you take it to Enhanced, which you'll do with your 2 points anyway, you just hit a pack of enemies with 1 Reap. That generates essence, but also if any enemy dies within that period, you just get this flat 30% attack speed, which is actually very relevant for, you know, the smoothness of spamming out your blood waves. You won't really use this out of that context, but it's that little bit of help that why would you not take, compared to say putting 2 points in Decompose and having it just be dead points. Either way, they're both darkness skills, so they give you that bonus. Next, we have the 1 level into Sever, and we take that to Paranormal. This means every third cast of Sever will not only fear enemies, which is interesting for build up of CC on bosses, but also it gives you that guaranteed vulnerable for 3 seconds. So say you're opening a fight against a boss, guaranteed vulnerable, no need for a proc or anything special. Again, another darkness skill on the bar, more movement, more damage, and it has relevant use for 3 points. Either way, 1 point Blight and going to Supernatural for the big damage bonus that provides, and we got the 2 points in Hued Flesh because I can't fit more, but I'm getting a 3rd point from one of my mythic uniques. Same as before on the next area, we have Blood Mist to Dreadful for the crit strike damage bonus that provides. 3 out of 3 Titans Fall, so that we're able to kill elites in the pit clearing faster. We have a point into Necrotic Fortitude, so that's generating a bit of a barrier for us occasionally. Still using Corpse Explosion to Blighted for the darkness skill that becomes, and maxing out Fuel by Death. Down here we max out Death's Embrace, Amplified Damage, Precision Decay as before, and we're still going to Decrepify into Abhorrent. You may see people using Decrepify into Horrid for high tier pit pushing because it has this kind of cull effect against normal enemies when they're at 10% life. Not a bad idea if you're planning on pushing tiers 140 plus. If not, 100% the quality of life from Abhorrent, stay with it. Down here then we have 3 out of 3 Tides of Blood and Coalesce Blood, and 1 point into Drain Vitality for the perks of that generation of Fortify. As before, maxing out Reaper's Pursuit, which is giving us those bonuses for having darkness skills on the action bar. Thanks to the extra level I get from my mythic unique, it's giving us an extra 2% movement speed and 2% times more damage per darkness skill, which is awesome. Anyway, still maxing Gloom and Terror. And on the next stage, we're maxing out, of course, Bloodwave to Supreme, picking up Finality to its full, Memento Mori, Standalone, and of course the crit strike chance from Inspiring Leader. And then the last point, Rathma's Vigor, the key passive. Not much to say about the Book of the Dead, it is indeed the same as before. Reaper Sacrifice for Shadow, Skeleton Bone for the Overpower, and of course Golems under Iron for the crit strike damage. And this is being increased like the numbers we get, thanks to Sacrificial aspect on the Amulet. Now something that has changed a little bit is the Paragon. Still the same setup and glyphs and so on, but you know, where I've got my points set up is slightly different. Firstly, we still have Essence on the first board. Once you've got that guaranteed 100% crit strike chance on all your attacks, having those crit strikes deal more damage is obviously great, and you only need 25 dex to get this going for proper value. I come around like this to get my element resistances. You may want to pick up more element resistances in the board if you need it. Following points are going to be basically picking up all the missing max life nodes that I've had to ignore for the moment. For the second board then, as before, it's Blood Begets Blood, and we still have Sacrificial here for the nice damage modifier that provides, and then big bonus to magic nodes. It's great on Blood Begets Blood for that reason, since there are loads of magic nodes that are going to give us lots of extra increased relevant stats. Blood damage, sure, but of course the all-important damage while healthy. Just to reiterate, since I've said it quite a few times now, but you know, might as well say it in this video, when you put 5 points into Bloodwave in this season, you get a new perk. The damage is increased based on your damage while healthy and damage while fortified bonuses. So you can see my current bonus standing here is nearly 500% times. So the more of while healthy and while fortified bonuses you have, the more output you get on Bloodwave. So we have it all across our gear, damage while fortified, and in the Paragon you see lots of damage while healthy. So we get extra bonuses for that here thanks to Sacrificial. We also come down here to the rare node in relation to blood damage and damage while healthy, and the nodes around that. Right, that brings us to the right side where we have the next board, Bloodbath as before, big overpower increases, still using Abyssal here for the nice 25 dex activation for another big modifier of damage. It also has a big bonus though to rare nodes within range. So we have damage while fortified and overpower damage rare nodes close to that. So you can see the bonus they're getting is pretty insane thanks to Abyssal specifically. So hard to ignore that. I also pick up a lot of nodes on this area, picking up Suffused Resilience for damage reduction and resistance to all elements, and Thick Hide for damage while fortified and maximum life, as well as coming around to Powerhouse for overpowered damage at some point, but that's a later one to pick up. Coming to the right then, we're going to sneak over to the, of course, Frailty board, which is a nice stacking output. The longer enemies are cursed by us, the more damage modifier we get. It's really consistent and reliable. And on this, as before, we have Imbiber, which is giving us a lot of increased damage while healthy to scale our bloodwave damage. This is the first glyph that I actually put to legendary, since it gets that legendary bonus of increased damage while healthy. And it's also the first glyph that I'm working to level 100. If you're interested, the second one I'm working towards is Dominate, related to Overpower. There are lots of things on this board that I would love to take, such as increased attack speed and max life over here. But with the points that I have, I'm currently working on picking up more willpower around this. There's a few willpower to pick up to enhance Imbiber as much as I can, and that's what I want to do with my spare points as soon as possible. But anyway, extending the board up this way then, we have the final board, which is Flesh Eater as before, big damage increase. I go for this over Scent of Death because it turns out I just don't need more damage reduction. I have plenty as part of the build. So every 5 corpses I consume with Corpse Explosion, it's a big guaranteed damage increase. Timing this for when you're bursting a boss is pretty crucial. On this, we have minimal points to set up Dominate, which gives us a big overpower damage bonus. And again, when I have spare points at some point soon, I'm going to start stacking up the willpower around here as well to increase the overpower I get from that. But yeah, that's the Paragon board and why it's set up the way it is. Right, we certainly have stuff to talk about in regards to gear. As before, as I've shown you, Air of Perdition and of course Shroud of False Death, the 2 mythics that we're using in this build. On the gloves, we still have Ultimate Shadow to turn Bloodwave into a shadow skill, trying to get it close to a top roll at this point. The build functioning unique, Kessime's Legacy, of course. For boots then, it's the cursed aura on the boots where they used to be on the helm. This is just that way to get the guaranteed Decrepify around you. Enemies take way more damage while they're cursed, related to, our skill tree as well as the Paragon. And this means we don't have to have it on the bars, Decrepify, freeing up a slot for an extra darkness skill. On the weapon as before, it's still Tidal to increase the output of our blood waves. On the amulet, we now have Sacrificial, since we've reached that crit strike chance kind of minimal without Grasping Veins aspect in the build anymore. For rings, same as before, Vehemence for the ultimate damage increase, and Fast Blood for the blood orbs to continuously bring down the cooldown of Bloodwave every time we use it. Pretty simple. Let's talk about affixes. Can't change the uniques. So on the gloves, as before, we're getting crit strike chance, and then usual stuff around that, intel and max life. So on the boots, intel and max life, but instead we have resistance to all elements. You could also consider armor on your boots instead, if you have some sort of resistance to all elements on your amulet. Ultimately, however way you achieve it, reach resistance cap, reach armor cap, and you're good. On the two-hand mace, because that gets the inherent overpower damage, intel, max life, and overpower damage. On the amulet, we have ideally maximum life, but I've got intelligence here. And then you're looking for the all-important passives, as I said before. The most levels you can get to Tides of Blood, which is this passive here. You'd also like levels of Coalesce Blood and ideally also Gloom, but you can't quite get all 3 without some sort of Holy Trinity thing. I had a look at the trading website. How much would an amulet cost that has Tides of Blood levels and Coalesce Blood levels? And someone had listed it was the only listing, for I think 1 trillion gold. So that's how valuable and rare those things are. Ultimately, get Tides of Blood if you can, and if you can get Gloom or Coalesce Blood with that, that'd be insane. But bear in mind, this slot requires armor or element resist, where your boots requires armor or resistance to all elements as well. So you kind of have to make sure the build works before we go crazy. For rings, it's intel, max life, overpower damage, and on the other one as before, I also have that % chance to make enemies vulnerable. It's a convenience thing. I don't technically need this anymore because I'm running Sever and I have a guaranteed way to generate vulnerable, but not having to press that all the time and just letting this regularly proc for vulnerable, it is a real nice convenience thing. I do recommend it. Moving on to tempering. We can't do that for the mythic unique, so we have damage while fortified on every piece that you can get. It's the most important thing you can get. So we have it on our gloves. You can get it on your weapon and your amulet and your rings, so you must. That's the big modifier that's increasing bloodwave damage. Otherwise, curse size is basically the only relevant passive I can get there, so I get it. And on the boots, again, I've got curse size. Bit of movement with that temper as well, certainly nice to have, but there's nothing special here. No damage increase. Different for the weapon though. Damage while fortified for the biggest number you can get on any one slot, which is a big deal. And then obviously the chance for bloodwave to deal double damage, so we can get to that 100%. On the amulet, as before, damage while fortified, ultimate cooldown reduction, which we have on our other ring, same thing. But as before, I do have damage while fortified and blood orbs restore a bit of essence on this one for the convenience of one of the runes we're using, which is Quacks. Your next non-basic skill will spend all of your resource to increase its damage. So basically, I'm intentionally timing Bloodwave to consume that to deal more damage, but then that puts me to 0 essence. So because of this affix, all the blood orbs that spawned in with a Bloodwave, I'm picking them up to reset Bloodwave, is giving me essence, and then I can immediately drop like a blight on the target for a damage modifier if it's still alive. In terms of Masterworking then, let's go through it. We go for crit strike chance as the target for our Air of Perdition to get to 100% crit strike chance. That is very important. On Shroud of False Death, you don't have great options. I'd ideally aim for max life, but all stats isn't bad. On the gloves, you need to make sure you have nearly or at 100% crit strike chance, so I do aim for that here, but obviously I'd rather have damage while fortified. On the legs, it comes down to you. Ultimate damage is going to be ideal, but you want to make sure you're at 100% chance for Bloodwave to deal double damage, so you may need to target that. On the boots, I had to go for resistance to all elements because I needed to get to element resist cap. You may need to do the same, but otherwise max life is the target. On the weapon, I'd be going for damage while fortified here every time, but I needed to hit chance for Bloodwave to deal double damage to get to 100% total. So I've got a bit of an awkward setup, but damage while fortified would be ideal outside of that. On the amulet, you need to make sure that you're at armor cap, so that's what I aim for here. But the main thing here is to increase Tides of Blood levels, or, Gloom or Coalesce Blood if you have those. And outside of that, damage while fortified. On the rings then, same thing, damage while fortified as much as you can get, ideally on both of them. Right, time to talk gems and runes. As before, we've got intel in our armor, but we've made some changes to the runes in terms of the gear. I'm now running Igni Quacks as the combo for that. Before I was running Back Quacks because that allows you to run around to generate offering, but Igni is just a lot easier. It just stores offering and then it spends it on Quacks, basically when you're ready. I find that it allows me to do Bloodwave 2 or 3 times each reset, letting me weave in, say, a blight without spending essence. And it's a lot more kind of consistent and controllable than the movement thing, so I prefer it. Otherwise, we have another rune change here for the weapon. We have Zan Vex. Zan, as before, is giving us offering per ultimate skill cast. Amazing. But Vex is giving us that nice +1 to all skills for 10 seconds for a bit of increased output. Right, next up we have Occult gems and Witchcraft powers. I've taken the gems out to show you. Let's start with the Witchcraft powers. First up, I cannot find Lost Altars to save my life. I spent 3 hours today just running Nightmare Dungeons as fast as I could to increase the odds of me finding them. I found 1. But basically, for now, I've got Doom Orb. I'd rather have Piranha. Otherwise, we have Soul Harvest, which we're definitely going to keep, increasing primary core stat the more surrounded enemies we have as we use skills with cooldowns. Force of Will, massive overpower increase. We now have Purging Touch, which is tied to our Occult gem. You don't want to run that until you're ready, which I'll explain. But we finally have Hex of Whispers since they reintroduced it back to the game after my last video. This provides us with nice fortified generation, which is nice to have. But you got to make sure you've got it at that 2nd rank. Lastly, we have Aura of Siphoning as our aura. This provides poison damage ticking around us, but more importantly, it gives us a heal constantly for our max life. And it's our aura of choice, because I will run Aura Specialization when I finally get it. It increases critical strike damage to enemies within your aura, just a straight damage increase. But I can't find Lost Powers. Can't do it. Out of these options, it's honestly going to be a tough choice on what to remove. The thing that I will have to remove is going to be Soul Harvest or Force of Will. The thing is, I need 3 Growth and Decay options. So looking at them, I have 3 equipped right now, and then I have Force of Will, which is a Psyche, and Purging Touch, which can't go. So it's going to have to be Force of Will if you have Aura Specialization. But how and why are we using Purging Touch? Well, it comes down to our Occult gems, which I've taken out just to show you. The all-important, most important gem you can have is Voice of the Stars. It gives you a straight-up extra modifier for ultimate skill damage, amazing, but it also gives your ultimate skill an Eldritch tag, so it's considered an Eldritch power, When you have Purging Touch, it means your Eldritch damage is better, so your ultimate damage is better. You will need to get this to, I believe, rank 10 before it actually works for all enemies, not just head rotten as a warning. But yeah, it's a damage modifier for your ultimate once you actually have Voice of the Stars. So don't use that Witch Power skill until you have Voice of the Stars, but once you do, it's a great modifier for your output. Otherwise, we have Phantom String as before. Hexed enemies, we deal more overpower damage to them, amazing. And as a filler for the moment, I've got Wicked Pact, but I still don't have my ideal setup, which would be another legendary occult gem, which is Friend of the Bog. I have been grinding for days, and this stuff takes time. I'm currently being walled by skull fragments. Anyway, Friend of the Bog is what I'm aiming for my third slot, which will replace Wicked Pact. While you have 3 or more growth powers activated, you get massive core stat, so intel, and max life, which is going to increase our output as well as survivability, and we become unhindered, which is really nice. Obviously, as I've said, we have those 3 growth powers right there, so we're going to have to remove Force of Will when we get Aura Specialization, because we need to keep the 3 growth powers. Lastly, quick word on Mercenaries, they're the same as before. Subbo for bargaining chips, it just means we get extra overpower damage thanks to this guy. And then Reinforcement, whatever you like, I go right here just because it gives you the Bastion bubble, which is really nice for high pit pushing, that big damage reduction it provides. But there you have it. That is my overview of the ridiculously strong Shadow Wave build in Season 7. This is the build that I think will be the strongest universally for all content. And you know, you probably only need to clear like pits 100 to 110 for maximum efficiency. You know, so you clear them in like 2 minutes. But if you really want to push pits, this is going to get you towards 140 in its ideal form happily. If you want to push beyond that, we will have to make some sacrifices that make the normal gameplay much worse. But you know, if that's what you want to do, it is an option. I hope this overview and explanation was helpful and useful. So I wish you good luck with your RNG, maybe better than mine. For now then, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.